What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, I know I have been gone for a very long time. It's been a couple of months since I've been able to sit down and post another Detroit Lions video, and for that I apologize. But just moving off to college, being a collegiate athlete, and just having classes and exams and all of those things recently, it's been very hard to sit down and talk about this Detroit Lions team. However, exams are over, soccer is over, college is over for a month, and I am done and off of school for the foreseeable future. And I figured, what would be a better thing to do than to get back to what I love doing, and that is talking Detroit Lions football. So today we are back. Today is going to be the first video of many to come out over the next couple of months, or over the next month I should say, until I go back to school. And I am working on a way to continue this once I do get back on campus and once I kind of get back into the college routine. But I'm still working on it, still working out the kinks, and I will elaborate on that in a later video and or live stream. But today I wanted to bring it all back together. I wanted to talk about the Detroit Lions, talk about their record, talk about the talent on their team, talk about why they're losing football games, and why the Detroit Lions aren't as bad of a football team as some people may have you believe. But before we get into all of that, and before we get into the first Detroit Lions video in over 2 months, if you could be so kind as to like and subscribe to the channel. I know the content has been far and few between recently, but that is going to change starting right here and right now. So if you like daily Detroit Lions content, or you just want to keep up with the latest Detroit Lions news, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so that you never miss an upload. But with that being said, let's get right into the first Detroit Lions video.
So we get Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
Now, the Detroit Lions are a 1-10-1 football team, hosting the worst record in the NFL, and they are relying on a lot of rookie talent, including a number of undrafted rookie free agents. The Detroit Lions have needed the contributions from every single rookie that they have drafted this year, with, again, the addition of guys like Jerry Jacobs, AJ Parker, and a number of other undrafted free agent players that have been making impact plays, and even started a number of games for the Detroit Lions this year due to injury. Now, with that being said, despite the record and the on-talent paper that the Detroit Lions are hosting every single Sunday, I do not believe the Detroit Lions are the worst team in the NFL. And to kind of show what I'm talking about, I want to go over the Detroit Lions losses so far this season, because with the exception of the Eagles loss and the Cincinnati Bengals loss, the Detroit Lions have been incredibly close in just about every single game that they have played. And if you change maybe 3 to 6 plays in this season, the Detroit Lions could go from a miserable 1-10-1 to a respectable 5-6, 5-7 record in the playoff hunt, and in a very realistic hunt for a wild card spot right now in the NFC. So looking at the games that the Detroit Lions have lost, you look at the Week 1 game against the now 6-6 San Francisco 49ers, a team that has had a number of multiple big games, a team that has won a lot of games versus some solid football teams, right? They beat the Los Angeles Rams. They've had a couple really good showings against some other really good NFC powerhouse teams, and the Detroit Lions lost that game by 8 points on a failed 4th down conversion on the final drive of the football game. The Detroit Lions, at that point in the game where they failed to convert that 4th down, they had all of the momentum. They were coming off back-to-back scoring drives. Jared Goff looked really hot. He looked like he was just really dialed in. He was throwing some some really good footballs down the field. They converted 2 two-point conversions before that, so the likelihood of them converting a third was probably pretty high because, I mean, they had done it twice before. They probably had a third play lined up. And honestly, I believe if the Lions convert that fourth down, I think they continue that drive. I think they make it into the end zone, and I think they score the two-point conversion to, at the very least, send that game into overtime. And at that point, like I said, the Lions had all of the momentum, so it's very realistic that the Detroit Lions could have won that football game had they converted on the fourth down. Now, that didn't happen, and you may say, okay, well, that's a lot of what-ifs for a game that the Lions lost by 8 points. And to that, I agree. The Detroit Lions maybe didn't make enough plays in that game to stay in the game long enough. Obviously, they were behind enough to the point where they needed a big fourth quarter comeback, and although they fell short, the effort was there. They tried, they kept pushing, they kept scratching and clawing for those points, and they pulled that game incredibly close and fell just short of the victory. But that is a lot of what ifs for a game that the Detroit Lions were outplayed in for a majority of that football game. So look at the Lions' third loss of the season. Look at week 3 versus the Baltimore Ravens, the now number 3 seed in the AFC, sitting at 8-4. The Detroit Lions did not play their best game versus the Baltimore Ravens. In fact, they didn't score a point until the second half of that football game. However, the defense against a really explosive Ravens team with guys like Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson, and of course Marquise Hollywood Brown, the Detroit Lions held them to 17 points in 4 quarters, and the Detroit Lions in the second half were able to put up 17 points. The Detroit Lions took the lead at the end of that game with very minimal time left on the clock against a very good, very dangerous Baltimore Ravens team. Now, there was a coaching mistake, I would say. There was a mental mistake on that final defensive stand for the Detroit Lions. They backed the Ravens up big time, had a big third, I believe it was like 3rd and 20 something. It was a big play, and one of our players had a mental mistake. Our coach maybe didn't call the best play in that situation. The Ravens got it to the very, very edge of possible field goal range, and just because of the Lions' luck, they eventually gave up a NFL record 66-yard game-winning field goal to the Baltimore Ravens. Unfortunately, Justin Tucker just happens to be the best kicker in NFL history. He breaks a record. He, makes NFL history in that kick. There's not much the Lions can do about it. They played a really good game on defense with a couple more good plays on offense in the first half. The Lions win that game as well. And honestly, that game came down to one play. Justin Tucker slips. Justin Tucker gets even the smallest amount less power on that kick, or is even a little bit off on that kick. The Lions win that football game. That game came down to one play and one player making a career-defining play, and that's not on the Detroit Lions for being bad. That's on Justin Tucker for being great. So right there, that is one play that was the difference between a win and a loss, the difference between 1-10-1 and 2-9-1, right? Not a much better record, but a better record nonetheless. You then go another 2 weeks down the road to Minneapolis, where again, the Lions offense didn't play their best game, but didn't play their worst game either. They put themselves in a position to win with very minimal time left on the clock. Once again, the defense didn't call their greatest plays. Aaron Glenn didn't do the greatest job in that game when it came down to holding the Minnesota Vikings to minimal yardage at the end of that game to keep them from field goal range. The Minnesota Vikings drive down the field, get a couple big plays, big shots down the field, maybe a mental mistake or two from a player, maybe a mental mistake or two from a coach, and the Minnesota Vikings, as time expired, hit a game-winning 57-yard field goal. Once again, not because the Lions were bad, because one player did his job and made a phenomenal field goal kick to beat the Detroit Lions. That's another play. That's 2 plays this season by themselves that are the difference between 2 wins and losses. The Detroit Lions happen to be on the losing end of those scenarios, but that's 2 plays where the Lions had the lead as time expired, and the kicker for the opposing team just happened to be on his game that day and just happened to make a phenomenal field goal, happened to just, have a really good kick at that point in time and come up clutch for their team. You move to the Pittsburgh game where they tied. They tied the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are now 6-6-1, a 500 franchise that a couple of weeks ago was pushing for the first place spot in the AFC North. They tied that game with a significant amount of injuries. on their football team, which they are still facing to this very day. They still have a lot of injuries. They're still without their top 2 pass rushers, still without their all-pro center, without wide receiver 1. Now they're without DeAndre Swift. They're still facing a lot of injuries, just like they did in that Pittsburgh game. But the Lions played tough. The Lions hung tough with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who again, at the time, I believe were 5-3, pushing for the number 1 spot in the AFC North, and in turn, the number 1 spot in the AFC at that point in time. And if the kicker can make a pretty easy, pretty realistic field goal in the middle of that overtime, the Detroit Lions walk off the victors of that football game. If the kicker makes an extra point in that game, again, the game ended 13-13 because the kicker missed an extra point after a touchdown. If he makes that field goal, the Lions win the game in regulation. So right there, the Lions had 2 opportunities with a field goal kicker to kind of redeem themselves, right? They lost 2 big games on field goal kicks. They had an opportunity to win the game, and special teams let them down not once, but twice in that game, and they made a change at kicker. Now we have Riley Patterson, who seems to be much, much better, who's made a couple really big kicks already, but in that game, the kicker couldn't come through clutch like kickers had against the Detroit Lions before, and because of that, the Lions tied that football game. The next week, they go to Cleveland. They lose by 3. Again, there were some special teams errors, and there were some missed kicks by both teams, but the Lions especially had a really rough day when it comes to kicking the ball. The Cleveland Browns, in case you were curious, are 6-6, another 500 team on the season that the Detroit Lions were within 3 points of beating. And then you look at the Chicago Bears on Thanksgiving, they lost on a last-second field goal, and they lost by 2 points to the division rival Chicago Bears. So there are 4 games out of the Detroit Lions' 10 losses that came down to game-winning field goals. 3 of them even, were hit against the Detroit Lions as time expired, and one of them was missed by the Detroit Lions, which ended up having the tie. The Lions' defense especially has been very, very impressive this year. They have had 6 games where they have held their opponents under 20 points. And if the Lions even had an average scoring offense, they would be probably close to a 500 football team. They'd probably be just below it. But if you look at this game, if you look at this season even as a whole, and you think, okay, 4 games have come down to game-winning, time-expiring, or overtime field goals to decide the game. 1 game came down to a 4th down conversion that we failed to convert on. In 1 against the Browns where, you just had a couple special teams errors, you just had a couple mental errors here and there, but you were very close versus a really, really good Cleveland Browns team. You look at this season and you say, okay, they're 1-10-1. They're playing a lot of rookies. They're playing a lot of UDFAs. This team isn't any good. But then you look at this team saying, okay, they have 6 games where they've allowed less than 20 points. They have, a bunch of games where it comes down to the very final play versus a great Baltimore team, a solid Minnesota team, a solid Pittsburgh team, a solid Cleveland team, and a below average Chicago team. You look at that and you say, they're close, right? They are within 2 points. 3 points, 2 points again. They lost by 2 to Baltimore. They lost by 2 to Minnesota. They tied Pittsburgh. They lost to 3 to Cleveland. They lost by 2 to Chicago. They are within 1 play, 1 field goal of being a, borderline 500 franchise. And people act like, yeah, the Lions are 1-10-1. Their record looks like the worst in the NFL, but the Lions aren't playing like the worst team in the NFL. And when you look at this team for the future, there's a lot of reasons to be excited for this team. Again, right now, with arguably the worst talent on paper in the NFL, with starting a UDFA at cornerback on the boundary and a UDFA cornerback in the slot, with Charles Harris being your number 1 pass rusher, relying on every single rookie from rounds 1 to 7 to make big plays for you, right? Our 4th round linebacker is starting next week and has the headset on because he is has to step up because of injuries, right? Our, 3rd round defensive tackle, our 2nd round defensive tackle, our 7th round running back has been making plays. All of these rookies have been relied upon to make impact plays for the Detroit Lions. And although they're not all consistent every single play, they've all shown so many flashes and shown that they can be key pieces and role players, if not starters, on this team for the future. And when you look at the Lions right now, you look at this team and you say, say, okay, on paper, they're probably the worst team in the NFL talent-wise, right? All these UDFAs, all these rookies, all these injuries. You look at the wide receivers, you look at the quarterback, you look at, who's starting at center right now, you look at who's starting at cornerback, you look at, really anywhere on this line, and you're going to say there's not a big name, there's not an alpha, and if anything, I don't know half of this defense. I don't know half of this offense, but if you look at the Detroit Lions for the future, you look at their cornerstone pieces or their pieces to build around on offense, you have DeAndre Swift, you have TJ Hockenson, you have Frank Ragnow, you have Taylor Decker, and you have Penei Sewell. That's 5 players on the offense out of your starting 11 that you can build around and that you have solidified for a long time, or that you have the opportunity to solidify for a long time in the case of TJ Hockenson, who does still need to sign his contract. And then you have a couple role players, a couple of guys that can be starters, probably won't ever elevate themselves to that elite status, but guys that have proven that they can either be role players or quality starters for the Detroit Lions moving forward. Guys like Jonah Jackson, who started at left guard for a while. Guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had the game-winning touchdown last week. The guys like Quintez Cephas, who was having a really good season before injury derailed his season. Guys like Jermar Jefferson, who have made some really big plays. And, Jermar Jefferson is averaging 13 yards a carry as a 7th-round rookie running back, right? There are guys to build around on this offense. Not all of them are cornerstone pieces, quote unquote, but, there are guys that are either role players or big name guys that you can build an offense around, right? If you're starting 5, right? If you're starting a franchise, it would be pretty good of you to have a franchise running back, a franchise tight end, an all-pro center, and 2 high-quality tackles on your offensive line. If you're starting a franchise or taking over a franchise trying to turn it around, that's a pretty good foundation to start with, not to mention all the other role players I mentioned before. But then you go to the defense, who admittedly I think has less talent and less star power than the offense, but you still have Romeo Okwara, who had 10 sacks a season ago and who had a lot of pressures and was, playing pretty solidly before injuries derailed his season. You have Amani Oruwariye, who has 5 picks in 12 games, who is looking really good. Maybe not locked down, but more of a Trayvon Diggs-esque corner where it's like he might give up a play here and there, but he's also going to make you pay if you test him too many times. Amani Oruwariye, I believe, is 2nd in the NFL in interceptions with 5 on the season, only trailing Trayvon Diggs of the Dallas Cowboys. And as far as role players, you have the 2nd-round pick in Levi Onwuzurike, you have the 3rd-round pick in Aleem McNeil, the 4th-round pick in Derek Barnes, the 3rd-round pick in Ifeatu Melifonwu. You have a former number 3 overall pick in Jeff Okudah, who didn't look phenomenal in this first game before he got hurt, but did make a couple plays and had, I believe, a pass deflection or 2. Jerry Jacobs, who has stepped up tremendously. Tracy Walker, who has played really, really well this year. And you look at this team, there's a lot of young talent on this team. Not all of these guys are going to be all pros, but all of these players that I have mentioned on the offense and the defense can be role players and can help the Detroit Lions win games both now and in the future. All of these players are young. All of these players are either on their rookie or the 1st or 2nd year of their 2nd contract, and all of those players I mentioned are under 27 years old. Every single one of those players, maybe even be under 25. I think Frank Ragnow's 26, but a majority of those players are 27 or younger, which is really, really good for the youth part of this Detroit Lions franchise. Now, defensively, they started the season a little bit rough. Aaron Glenn's defense didn't really find their groove until after the bye week, but after the bye week, they have been phenomenal. I mentioned earlier in the video that they have 6 games allowing less than 20 points. They have 3 games decided on last-second field goals. Offensively, the Detroit Lions have looked much better the last 2 weeks. They've looked much more aggressive. That Jared Goff has pushed the ball down the field a lot more. Jared Goff last week threw 3 touchdowns even, did have that really bad interception, but outside of those 2 mental mistakes of the fumble and the interception, Jared Goff looked really good in the start of that game. It looked really good at the end of that game. The touchdown ball, the seam ball he threw to TJ Hockenson was on a rope. That was a phenomenal throw. The touchdown he threw to Brock Wright for his first NFL touchdown was a phenomenal throw. And then, of course, you have the game-winning throw in, as time expires, 4th and 2, no time left, last play of the game to win the first game in Detroit over a year. And Jared Goff stares down the pressure, steps up in the pocket, and delivers a really, really good ball to Amon-Ra St. Brown in the end zone to win the Lions' first game. You know, the Lions have been more aggressive recently. The Lions have pushed the ball down the field more with the addition of Josh Reynolds, and the offense is improving. It's getting better in the last 2 weeks, and with the defense standing where they are, allowing, averaging about 20 points allowed per game, that is a very winnable formula for the Detroit Lions. If the defense can allow 20-ish points a game, the Lions will have a chance to win every single football game, because as an NFL offense, you should be able to put up 21 points. You should be able to score 3 touchdowns in 4 quarters. And if your defense is allowing 20 points a game, that means you should be winning a lot of football games. And not to mention, the Lions are doing this. They're showing all this improvement with all of these young players and having all of these close games with a first-year head coach, a first-year offensive coordinator, a first-year defensive coordinator, a first-year assistant head coach, with the youngest roster in the NFL, and with a new signal caller at quarterback. They are doing all of this despite all of their adversity, despite all of the injuries, despite all of the conflict, despite all of the losing even, and despite having all these first-year players and all these first-year coaches coming in, trying to change this culture, trying to turn this thing around, tear down to the studs, and build something back up that's much more sturdy than what Matt Patricia had. You have all of these reasons for the Detroit Lions to fail. And yet they're playing Baltimore within 2 points. They're playing Minnesota within 2 points. They're playing Pittsburgh to a standstill and a tie. And even I thought they outplayed Pittsburgh for a large majority of that game. They're playing Cleveland to a standstill, only losing by 3, right? Those are 4 borderline playoff teams that they played really closely to within the final play of the game. And you also look at Brad Holmes and you look at John Dorsey, who've brought in all this immense talent over the past the past year with the draft and with free agency. Every single draft pick that those two had this year has hit. A lot of their free agents even have hit. Jamal Williams was really, really good. Charles Harris has been really, really good. They've had a lot of guys from free agency and especially from the draft and from UDFA specifically that have hit and that have been big time playmakers for this team. And Brad Holmes' ability to identify and draft talent gives me so much hope for the future, right? Every draft pick has hit. Every rookie has had big contributions. Aaron Glenn is helping his defense play to his strengths, helping his defense play fast and aggressive, and forcing a lot of turnovers and not allowing a lot of points, which, you might say, okay, he's had some mental mistakes. Okay, the double timeout was bad. Okay, the Baltimore end was bad. The Minnesota end was bad. Those were early season mistakes. And even the Thanksgiving one, that's going to happen as a defensive coordinator. Aaron Glenn, I think, called the play correctly. I don't think his players were set up correctly, because I was at that game. I saw Aaron Glenn on the sideline. He was actually like 3 or 4 yards onto the field, jumping and throwing things, and was all kinds of upset because his defense wasn't running the play or didn't quite understand exactly what he called as a defensive coordinator. So I don't even think the double timeout was Aaron Glenn's fault. I think that was more a mental lapse from the players, and I believe it was actually a mental lapse from Will Harris, if I'm to be specific, but I'm not entirely sure on the player himself. I believe it was Will Harris, but I'm not entirely sure. But again, Aaron Glenn's getting better, and he's helping his defense play to their highest potential. Every single one of these players, these coaches, these play callers is in a new system, trying to build up from the bottom, trying to take the worst roster in the NFL, trying to take one of the worst franchises over the past decade and build it into something that they can be proud of, that the city of Detroit can be proud of, and that they can have to win football games. And so far, you can look at the record and say they're not doing their job. You can look at the record, say they're not doing enough. You can look at the game-changing mistakes or the game-changing plays and say they're not doing enough as coaches. They're not doing enough as play callers. They're not doing enough as players and playmakers on the field. But the fact of the matter is, the Lions aren't that far away. The Lions on paper are the worst roster in the NFL, but the Lions on the field are a competitive team that will stick with you for 4 quarters, 90% of the time, excluding Cincinnati and Philadelphia. But they are a team that will stick with you, that will fight, that will hit you in the mouth, that if you score on them, they're going to score back, that, they're going to force turnovers, they're going to play fast, they're going to play aggressive, and that is exactly what Lions fans wanted before the season, right? Losing sucks. Losing 10 games in a row sucks. It absolutely does. And I'm not giving them excuses. I'm not saying they've done no wrong, because the coaches do need to improve. The players do need to improve. The talent needs to improve on this team. Brad Holmes still needs to do his job and continue to build this team up properly. This team is not there yet. And that is not what I'm trying to say. But when you look at this team, they don't have the structural flaws that Jacksonville has. They don't have, the structural flaws in the organization and in the roster that maybe the Texans have. The Lions are far from the best team. They're not even a top 20 team, not even a top 25 team in the NFL right now, because they are 1-10, and on paper they are the worst team in football. But the talent and the product that they put on the field every single week, the effort that they put on the field every single week, has them in these close games. So you give Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn another year to kind of, one, build up this roster, right? Get more talent in, maybe get that alpha pass rusher, maybe get that big time alpha wide receiver, get a really talented young quarterback that can maybe sit for a year or just straight up overtake Jared Goff in his first training camp. You get them some talent and some alphas on this team's winning football games, right? You give them a true number one X wide receiver that can just go up and win jump balls and can just dominate every single Sunday, and the offense is going to look a lot better. You give them an alpha pass rusher that can get you 15 to 20 sacks a season, this team's going to look a lot better. If Brad Holmes can continue to build up the roster with talent, and Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn can continue to improve and motivate these players and get them to play to their strengths and play fast and aggressive, there's no reason this team can't turn it around incredibly quickly. There's no reason that next year even they can't be a 500 team, maybe even a borderline wild card team if they overachieve in just the slightest areas. This team is not that bad. The Lions are not that bad of a franchise. And I know there's going to be people saying they're not winning, and that is true. But the Lions weren't going to win this year. The Lions, especially with all the injuries they've endured, could not win this year because they strictly didn't have the talent. They didn't have the people in the building to win football games this year. This year was a building year. This was the year where Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell and John Dorsey and Sheila Ford-Hamp tore it down to the studs. They got rid of Matthew Stafford. They got rid of Kenny Golladay. They got rid of Marvin Jones. They got rid of Matt Prater. They got rid of all of the old talent on this roster that was still here from the Matt Patricia era, and they replaced it with new, young talent that is still growing, still developing, and still learning. And they're building the foundation. They invested in the offensive line and finished that. They invested in the defensive line. I think they still need maybe 1 or 2 more picks on the defensive line, but they're not that far away. The Lions, this was the year for the Lions to build a foundation. This was the year for the Detroit Lions to set the groundwork for the future, and I think they've done a phenomenal job at doing so. Now, with all that being said, that is all for you guys today. Again, sorry for being so long between videos. Sorry for taking over 2 months to get back to this Detroit Lions content. But a lot of content should be coming your way very, very soon. This video should be out on Saturday. The Lions play the Broncos on Sunday, which I will very, very much try to live stream and try to get back in the groove of that as well. And again, content will be coming a lot more frequently in the near future. So that being said, if you're still here, if you're still a fan after the 2-month hiatus, I appreciate you, and I will see you all tomorrow with some more Detroit Lions content. But until then, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you, and remember, as always, go Lions!